Back to the HG Rugby podcast. USA Rugby, we've got to talk about it. The sleeping giant, according to everybody, the market that rugby needs to break in order to make itself financially sustainable. But with everything that's going on off the pitch, is that possible? With teams going out of the MLR yet again, and with the men's team struggling on the rugby field, what is the immediate future and even long-term future for USA Rugby? To talk about it a little bit more, I am delighted to be joined by USA Rugby fan and general stats rugby nerd, James Deeley. James, thank you for joining me. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Nice to finally get on the show.
Yeah, pleasure. We've been trying to set this up for a little while. So, continuing the long tradition of this podcast of bringing on people to talk about a subject whose accent doesn't sound like they should know about it, explain to people your qualifications for talking about rugby in North America.
So, as you mentioned, the accent gives it away. I'm British. I was born and raised in the UK, but then when I was about 22, I moved over to Canada. So I'm in Toronto. I have been for the last 10 years. I'm a Canadian citizen, and then followed the Arrows while they were in Major League Rugby, and then have kept up following that league because of it's the closest thing I can get to professional rugby. It's a lot easier to watch the MLR than it is to say the Prem or Super Rugby. So I've just kind of stuck with MLR and sort of made a little niche out over here.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get straight into talking about business then. So before we get into talking about USA men's rugby, I'm talking about the MLR because there's lots to speak about there. We'll be talking about the change in the clubs, and we'll be talking about the PNC and things. But first, let's talk about the thing that's just happened, which is the Women's Rugby World Cup. The final was played 2 days ago at time of recording, with England beating Canada. Obviously, as someone from England but living in Canada, what was your thoughts on that final and the campaigns of those two teams?
Well, I've often said, I support England and I support Canada, which isn't much of a problem in the men's game because they rarely play each other in a sort of in their own little bubbles. But the women's is very different because England play Canada quite often, or more often, I should say, because they're the best two teams in the world, and they were the two teams in the World Cup final, and it was interesting. Interesting. The final was because I always thought, hey, this is a win-win for me. Either one of my teams will win, but then I found myself leaning towards Canada because of the underdog story and the whole, they had to crowdfund their way there, the fairy tale and all that stuff. And we ended up going to a sort of the most well-known rugby bar in Toronto, which is Hemingway's, a Kiwi bar. And they had it on all 3 or 4 of their floors. They had it on all but one of their TVs, I think. The other one was devoted to the Springboks game. Right. But it was rammed with so many Canadian shirts I've never seen in there before. It's usually loads of expats and everything, but this was full of Canadians. My girlfriend, funny enough, borrowed my Canada shirt to wear, so I had to wear my England one. So I was getting some jeering and everything, but it worked out. It was really good atmosphere.
Talk to us about the kind of the hype of that game and getting into the final, and Canada getting to the final, because so I did a podcast about Canadian rugby, which people can check out with Karen Gasbarino. It's on this channel. Just search it a couple of videos ago. And that was on about 1,200 views about 3 weeks after it went out. And then when Canada beat the Black Ferns in the semi-final, within 5 days, it won 6,000 views. So even from my point of view, I saw a huge spike in interest about it. So did it kind of take over the country?
Sort of, in a way. I guess I'm more in tune with the rugby in the country than a lot. So it'd be a lot of people sort of tuning in that I wouldn't expect. We had, I think Willow of Squidge Rugby was on Sportsnet in Vancouver in the build up to the game. Mark Carney was obviously there. I think it really did start to take over. And like I said, at the bar we were watching at, it was pretty much all Canadians. There wasn't very many English people there, probably because they couldn't get in. It was rammed in there. It was a really good atmosphere. I think they really did start to get behind this team, especially when a lot of people don't know much about rugby, but they know New Zealand are good, and then they must have seen, oh my God, Canada beat New Zealand. We could do this. What's going on? Why are the Canadians so good? It's because they're amazing. I really think they really kind of Canadians are very, very proud of their sports teams, and I think it's to say the women are going to a Rugby World Cup final, they'll immediately hop on. They'll immediately hop on any of their teams, any of their athletes that go and succeed. So I think this was just the same again.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to round off this women's rugby chat, to I read a World Rugby reports that had a really interesting section about kind of where in the world is fans of women's rugby versus men's rugby, and it kind of found that in Canada and USA, it's kind of at an international level, there's no kind of differential between the two. People are equal supporters of both. Is it fair to say that women's rugby is kind of the gateway for rugby into North America at the moment, with Canada getting to World Cup final and USA women, okay, got knocked out of the group stage, but currently a lot stronger than the men's team?
Yeah, and the superstardom of Ilona Meyer, I think, just kind of propels women's. Obviously, she propels rugby, but she's naturally going to propel women's rugby more because that's the game she plays. No, you make a great point, and I do think that a lot of men's sports are kind of dominated by the NFL or the NHL and everything. So a lot of men go into playing football, hockey, baseball, all of that. But a lot of women, if they want a contact sport, it's pretty much rugby. And there's hockey as well. There's the PWHL that started up over here, but it's really rugby and hockey and WNBA. So I think rugby, at least on the women's side, has the opportunity to become one of the big four in the US and Canada. And I mean, look at some of the athletes they've got. Look at Asia Hogan Rochester, and then Sophie de Goody missed half a bloody year and is still Player of the Year. Like, there's some superb athletes there. I just think, and they've had success. The US and the Canadian men have been in a bit of a slump. Maybe they're starting to get out of that now, but they've been in a bit of a slump. They didn't qualify for the last World Cup. The women's been successful, both across the board, really.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Let's come on to talking about the men's international sides then. So we're going to talk about the MLR at length in a bit, but before we do that,
yeah,
the Pacific Nations Cup has just happened. We did a special pod all about it with Stephen Noble. You can check it out on this channel from a couple of weeks ago. Where the thing that neither myself or Steve knew tons about was the North American side. So that's what we're addressing now. One win each for Canada and USA. Canada's win coming against USA. Now both, thanks to those single victories, have qualified for the Rugby World Cup in Australia. How do we frame the campaign for those two then? Is it job done?
I'm not necessarily sure it's job done. I think, well, it definitely wouldn't be job done. I don't think any of the players and coaches involved would say that. But I think it is a weight off both of their shoulders, both teams' shoulders. Canada have been in a slump for 4 or 5 years at this point. Under Kingsley Jones. Kingsley Jones is now gone, and we've got Stephen Meehan, who's come in, who I think was always kind of the next in line because he was actually hired as a Toronto Arrows head coach before they withdrew. So he was always kind of had the eyes of Rugby Canada. He's now come in, and that one win in Calgary against the US, I think, just kind of got it out of the way, got the fear out of the way, got the kind of the pressure out of the way, and now we can say, okay, well, we're in. So now we can start building. You've seen some of the results, even though they've not been wins. They've not particularly been close against the likes of Japan or Fiji, but they're better than I think they would have been if Kingsley Jones was still in charge. I think they're making steps, and that win against the USA actually wasn't that close. And turning to the USA, that really put pressure on them. I think the USA and Scott Lawrence kind of assumed they were going to win that game because of the state that Canadian men's rugby was in going into the PNC this year. And then it came as a bit of a shock to them that it wasn't actually that close. Thanks in large part to Tyler Ardron. But
yes.
I think they will be very, very relieved that they beat Samoa, and that's a different story that I'm sure could be a different show. What's going on with Samoa right now, that they've just lost to Chile, and they had something like 10 of their normal starters weren't there, so now they're in the repechage, which is probably bad news for likes of Belgium and everyone else in the repechage. But the USA took advantage of that. You can only play the team in front of you on the day, and they dominated Samoa in Utah. Yeah, so they're both in now, and I think I think it like I said, it takes a lot of weight off the shoulders of both camps.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So this is something that I asked Karen in our Canada special, and I want to get your thoughts on it as well. Obviously, you
Mm,
referred to it already, as I just bring up some window dressing for our YouTube viewers. The the narrative around Kingsley Jones, I'll be
mm.
honest with you, I got a little bit uncomfortable towards the end of how it just became cool to Kingsley Jones bash, and how it just became like a running joke. And because I'm not here to try and tell anybody that he did a good job. Obviously, that would be wrong of me to say, but I got the fee from the reading that I did. It seemed like that there was a lot more to it. What's kind of your take on that
I think
whole side of it?
I think I'll agree with you. I'm not going to sit here and say Kingsley Jones did a good job, but there is also a part of me that thinks he was sort of like a scapegoat, honestly, because I think the issues were more institutional than just Kingsley Jones is a bad coach. I don't think it's the fact that Rugby Canada kept saying, "Hey, we're going to keep this guy. Hey, we're going to stick with this guy. Hey, we're going to do this," because there was so much drama and there was no kind of uh, unity at the upper management level of Rugby Canada. I just think that he was a scapegoat, and it was more of a let's just keep that going because we've got bigger things to deal with, which was kind of figuring themselves out from either financial or leadership point of view above the head coach. But I think that he is a part of it, whether he wants to be or not, because he was the head coach for I think way too long. And I think a lot of the what you said, your Kingsley Jones bashing was more a reflection on Rugby Canada as an organisation. Now, some of it obviously wasn't. Some of it was just saying he's a crap coach, let's get out of it, which I'm not entirely sure is fair because he wasn't exactly being given resources to succeed, although he was also not helping himself. Um, but I do think there's more to it than just Kingsley Jones was a bad coach.
Yeah. Okay, for sure. Thank you for that. I probably agree with what you're saying there. So, coming on to the USA side of things,
Mhm.
obviously they lost that game against Canada, which was a shock. And like you said, I think there was a bit of complacency there. And then, what did you make of the rest of their campaign? Like you said, they tailed it off with a win against Samoa, which I think was
Mm.
also a shock. But are there any signs there to you that they maybe are heading in the right direction as a team?
Well, the expanded World Cup format definitely helped both the USA and Canada out. A lot of the criticisms of the USA, the Eagles, going into well for the last couple of years actually was how the hell are we going to have a World Cup here if they can't even qualify? Well, that argument's gone now. They've qualified. They beat Samoa to do it, which, like you said, is a massive surprise. Um, and to be honest, they look like a different team against Samoa. Now, I don't think Samoa played particularly well, but they the USA finally managed to sort out their line out, which had plagued them the entire campaign pretty much. Um, they looked like they were up for it. They looked like they did not want to go into the repechage again, which they did last time, and then I think it was a draw with Portugal actually
Yeah.
sent them home. Um, they looked like, hey, this is our last chance. We don't want to go into the repechage, and all credit to them. They did look like a different team. Now, some of the selections were based on a sort of who is available at the time, which is the same for every country. I mean, Canada had, like I said, Ardron for one game, and then kind of pick and choose between a few of them. But what I have to say is the line out was kind of one glaring weakness of the USA's game for the whole PNC until that Samoa game where they really seemed to sort it out.
Yeah, for me, looking at USA's performances, I really felt like that Samoa victory came out of nowhere to an extent because I hadn't seen anything in the preceding rounds that had given me hope. Like you said, they had some selection changes, which probably did help them out. And I agree that the motivation of not being in the repechage again was probably a big, like, no, guys, let's get it right this time.
Yeah.
But some of the underlying statistics of their performances I thought were particularly poor, even against teams like Japan, which you would always expect would easily beat them. I'm just not seeing tons of
The
progress there.
consistency.
Yeah, consistency. Do you think that
Mm.
you think it's the coach is under pressure, or do you think it's just about access to quality players?
I think the coach was under pressure. I think he's probably saved himself now with the qualification. But I mean, if you know, I mean, if ifs and buts and everything. But if Samoa had won that game, I think we'd be having a very different conversation. But the Scott Lawrence's sort of mission has always been 2031, and the 2027 World Cup's been a real kind of I don't know so how you trying to think of the word now, measuring stick for how the mission is going. And now that they've qualified for that, I think they'll earn some more favourable fixtures. They'll earn some more fixtures for a start. It's possible the select. I don't think it's fair to really say the selections are everything. I really think after you've just said that the consistency isn't quite there. It does seem like this Samoa victory was kind of out of nowhere. Um, Now it remains to be seen if that was because of the USA's great performance or because of Samoa falling off a cliff. But maybe it's a bit of both, which is why it was kind of so stark the difference from the Japan and Canada games to the Samoa game, because it wasn't close, that Samoa game. It was, what was it, 26-point win. I know I know they scored a couple of tries in the last few minutes, but Samoa didn't really seem to be with it very much the entire game, which maybe they took it easy on. Maybe it made it easy for the USA, I should say. But I don't. I think I'm with you that it's not particularly convincing if you do it once. If they do it again and put a couple more performances together, I think I'll start to get behind them a bit more. But unfortunately, the PNC's over, so we don't know. It's going to be months before they play another game.
Yeah, yeah, we'll keep an eye out on what their European tour is going to look like in November. But before we go on now and talk about the MLR and how that ties into the men's Eagles situation, I just want to remind people to subscribe to the podcast if you're enjoying what you are listening to so far. The next goal on this channel is 7,500 subscribers. I would love it if you were along for the ride. Also, if you're thinking, Hugh, this is fantastic, but it's a bit long for a YouTube video, isn't it? Then you can check it out on Spotify or Apple. Search HG Rugby. You'll find it under the same title, same everything. And I'm targeting 300 followers on Spotify by the end of October. If you can help me get to that goal, I'll be massively appreciative. You can even leave a comment on Spotify. I'll see it. I'll reply. Leave a comment on YouTube as well. I'll see it and I'll reply. And I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts. Okay, James, let's get into kind of the meaty discussion that is gripping not just USA rugby, but kind of the world rugby community at the moment. And that's all about Major League Rugby. So let's just kind of establish what's happened lately. So we were into was it seventh or eighth season? This season
This is
just
the
gone?
eighth, 2025
season. And 4 teams, we are minus 4 teams to what we started that season with. Now one's merged and 3 have gone out of business. Do you want to just familiarize people with what's happened in the off season?
Yeah, well, yeah. How long have you got? So the Free Jacks won their third Shield in a row back in the end of August, I think it was. No, it was the end of June. What's the date on this? June. And then everything went crazy, which is why I'm a bit mussed up with the dates, because as with most things MLR, rumors kind of start to circulate. Everyone seems to kind of have their own take on it, and then it gets announced. That's just been the way for all kinds of things over the last kind of 5-6 years, and it follows by now a very predictable pattern. And unfortunately, what happened is that actually, while I was at the final, talking to some people there, the Miami Sharks were getting cold feet over the MLR, the league itself. They were then convinced to stay in after they qualified for the playoffs and made their first post-season appearance. But then I think, with probably pushed by some other uncertainty around other teams in the league, they were back out again. So they pulled out about the same time as NOLA Gold, which was in August. And actually, that was after you mentioned that two teams merged. So that was pretty soon after the 2025 season ended. We had Rugby FC LA and the San Diego Legion, the league's two California teams. They both merged into what is going to be known as the California Legion. So it's taking a lot of the branding of the San Diego franchise, which was a league original member. It's been runner-up twice. They're the winningest team in MLR history. They just haven't won a shield. Winningest is a word over here, I should say. It is a word here. I hate it, but it's a word here. And it seems that RFCLA kind of seems like the Legion merged into RFCLA in that a lot of the staff are going to be LAs. A lot of the coaching is going to be LAs. A lot of the players are going to be LAs, with a few probably from the Legion kind of sprinkled in. That leaves the league with one California team. Then, as I mentioned, the Miami Sharks and the NOLA Gold pulled out within about a week of each other. They both gave very wishy-washy reasons as to why that is. The Miami Sharks is particularly notable because they are actually owned by Argentina's richest man. So I don't think it was money wasn't a particular.
And wasn't there CEO given like an award, like best CEO in MLR or something?
Yes, it was Executive of the Year about a week before the team withdrew. So that's a bit of an embarrassment on MLR. Actually, I made a video about it and mentioned that, along with NOLA Gold, who have a guy on their staff who is a bit interesting. He was involved in the Austin team that have also folded. He's now involved in NOLA, who have pulled out, and they had, they published there was a bit of an ownership takeover a year or two ago at the NOLA Gold, and they published all this stuff saying, the next few years are going to be brilliant. We're going to put a new stadium in, a new, privately owned by us stadium. We're going to do all this in the run up to 2027 and 2031. And then a year later, they pulled out. So I'm not sure how much money they spent on this marketing campaign for that, but it's gone. So that's three of the teams. And then sort of out of nowhere a couple of weeks ago now, the Houston SaberCats pulled out, who finished as the runners-up in the 2025 season and were another founding member, along with San Diego Legion and the NOLA Gold. They pulled out, and they're still sort of active on social media, which is very strange. But they pulled out sort of citing differences between the direction that the league wants to go. You see on screen now, there's a message from Pote Human, the head coach. They've kind of been posting. To be fair to Houston, they've actually said a proper goodbye to fans from the team, from the head coach, and just as a franchise. But it's very, this Houston situation is particularly strange because it seems like, in fact, from what I've heard, it even surprised some of the other owners around the league. They had no idea that Houston were going to pull out, and it doesn't seem to be monetarily motivated, although they do mention in their statement that, hey, yeah, we've lost something like $50 million over the last 8 years. It seems to be more focused on the direction of the league, direction of the team.
Yeah, because it's not like they were struggling either. Like you said, they were runner-up. Was it 2 years in a row, or at least 1 year in a row?
1 year in a row. They've made the playoffs the last kind of 3 or 4 years, I think. They've been really kind of turning it around the last few years from where they were in 2018-19, which was kind of bottom feeders. But now they're competing for shields, and they won't be anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's just caused so much noise, and it really. With the whole thing, and like you mentioned it already, the whole thing about the World Cup going to USA and the perceived kind of desire from World Rugby to like force almost American rugby to work, and which we'll talk about a little bit more in a bit. But it just feels like the confidence in the market has evaporated. Like what's next then with 7 teams remaining? What is the league going to look like next season?
Yeah, we've got 7 teams right now, which is exactly what the league started out with in 2018. There was some rumblings about the Utah Warriors having investment issues or looking for new investment, which, I mean, 3-4 other teams pulling out is not going to be helpful in finding new investment. But it does seem like, from what I've heard, that they found that investment somehow. They were already confident about it anyway, but it looks like they've secured that. So I'm hoping, knock on wood, that Utah will be in there. So that leaves us with 7 teams for 2026. Although I've heard from some people around the league that there could be anywhere from 6 to 8 teams. So there's still quite a lot up in the air. But it seems like for 2026, we had the Free Jacks actually posted a thing saying we will defend our shield in 2026. Essentially confirming, hey, we'll have a season, which is it's reassuring for fans, but it's sort of absolutely insane that they have to post, hey, yeah, we're still going to exist next year. It's insane to me they have to do that. Now, I know this is in a background of lots of teams pulling out of MLR, and not even MLR in isolation. Lots of teams around the world have sort of gone by the wayside in the last kind of 5-ish years. But it seems to be hitting MLR very hard all of a sudden.
Yeah. How does that kind of play into the feeling around the league? Because at the end of last season, the season before the one we just had, they produced this. I remember they had this big social media thing about how the growth of the league and how many people were watching it and things.
Yeah.
Does this feel like a big surprise that is kind of against the run of play almost, that this is like contrary to what you would expect it to be happening, or is this kind of like you're not surprised?
So a lot of people around MLR fandom, at least, are a bit skeptical of the league putting out things like that. Now, they might well be true. I'm not saying they're fabricating it, but I think a lot of fans in the know that teams are still losing money hand over fist. I think it's on average $5 million a year per team that the teams are losing right now. And for some of these founding teams, it could just be fatigue for that. Like I mentioned earlier, Houston have lost over 50 million since their inception in 2017. I think that there might just be teams going, hey, look, some other teams are folding. Let's get out while we can, which isn't particularly. It's not great for fans from the surface level, but it seems very difficult for MLR to be able to inspire confidence in both fans and investors right now. I mentioned a minute ago that Utah Warriors might have found it hard pressed to find new investment with other teams pulling out. Well, a lot of fans that I've seen, like more kind of armchair fans, I suppose, are saying, well, what's the point? My team's going to go bust in a year or two, or what's the point? The league's going to fold and stuff like that. And I've heard from people who worked at MLR a month or two ago saying there were people at MLR saying if the league drops below 10 teams, it's done. Clearly, that's not the case because we're at 7 right now, and it seems like it's still going ahead at least. But it seems very, very difficult for MLR to inspire confidence right now. And speaking for Toronto, who a market that had a team,
yeah,
interest in the league is pretty much dead here now that we don't have a team. There are a couple, like I know the guys on La Rouge Rugby, they're still interested because they're rugby fans. I'm still interested because I'm a rugby fan. There are a handful of them, but nothing like the couple 3,000-ish that would go to an Arrows game, and we had a fan group going that was pretty active. It's dried up, and I think that's probably going to be the same for a lot of markets that have lost their team, which is going to hurt TV ratings and that kind of stuff. And that's another issue is the TV deal that MLR have at the minute, which fans pretty much unanimously think is probably a bad idea. But Nick Benson, MLR CEO, is going, no, we're happy with that deal. We're really happy with it, and I don't know why or how they can be happy with it, because it hasn't. ESPN Sports, which is where the 2025 season was broadcast, are not doing anything to promote it. It's sort of hidden in 3 or 4 different sub-menus on their site. Luckily for me, I can watch it on the Rugby Network because I'm outside of the US, but it's difficult to find. And I don't think that, even though MLR are selling or sold this deal as this is brilliant, it's amazing, we're going to be on one of the big networks, it's ESPN. They're not on one of the big networks. They're hidden in a back room on their website. And I think it's just fans are starting to see through. To come back to the original point, they're starting to see through a lot of the graphics saying everything's going great because, well, the obvious thing is we've shrank from 13 teams to 7 in the last few seasons. Doesn't sound like going great.
Yeah. So, okay, mean question then. This is a big question, but is it an MLR problem or a USA problem?
I'm tending to lean towards MLR problem. I think the last few years, this is an argument I've said a few times, they've just expanded anywhere they can. They've gone for, oh, there's an investment group there who are willing to give us money, let's go for it. Even if it's, probably a bad investment group, they're probably not going to do too much and probably going to bail in a couple of years. Look at the likes of Dallas, for example. They're just starting to turn things around, but they had an awful time. The team didn't really know, the marketing didn't really exist, and they weren't very, very proactive in promoting it in the local communities. And then they started to turn it around, and the ownership withdrew. Or as we were told, they're for sale, which I'm not sure I believe. But I do think it's an MLR problem in that they expanded way too quickly. Now, it's not universally bad. Obviously, they found some cracking ownership groups, the likes of New England and Seattle and Chicago. And what I thought was Houston, they had a good ownership group, but they've pulled out, not because of the money though, they've pulled out because of differences, which I think is another issue that is an MLR problem. There is no unity at the top right now. We've basically had one of the owners of the team confirm we're divided on how to move forward, and we don't like it, so we're going to pull out. Like, I don't see it as a USA problem because of the growth of the game, because of the likes of Ilona Mayer promoting rugby in general. I do think that the game is growing there, and it will continue to do so now that on the back of the USA Women's Eagles campaign in this year, just gone in the World Cup, and 2027 now the men's qualifying for it. I think it will continue to grow as a sport, but I'm afraid it might just be at international level. They'll support the USA, but they won't necessarily go and support the professional league. Or
to be fair, that's a rugby problem, not just
that is a rugby problem, not an MLR problem. It's pretty rare for people to get out to club games over here. And I don't think they'll get to many professional games because either they won't be aware of it or they won't be, because they can promote rugby all they want, but if they don't know that MLR exists, they're not going to go. Like I would go to Toronto game even if it's a club level Toronto, or if it's a semi-pro team in a Canadian league, for example. I would go, but I don't think I'm the average fan.
Yeah, well, that's it. We're the nerds over here. We're not the normal people. Just while I remember, you kind of semi-referenced it there. WER, the women's league. You talked about the women's team kind of being the flag bearers, the thing that's dragging everything else along. Do you have hopes and expectations for WER? One season in?
It's tough to say it one season in, but yeah, I do. I think it would grow. I think they will benefit hugely from the 2025 World Cup. And knock on wood, I'm hoping there might be a Canadian team or two that join that, because that is an evolution of what the WPL was, which is sort of the semi-pro club level competition. And now they're sort of professionalized, and their first season was good. I added that to my site as kind of the flagship women's competition in North America. Although they're still promoting players and everything, there's absolutely no news on the 2026 season. But I'm not exactly expecting anything just yet. I don't know how the off season goes for WER because it's only one season in. So I have hope. I'm cautiously optimistic, I think, but that might be because I'm burnt because of MLR.
Well, okay, so some kind of last point on this then. So Well, I say last point. It's like a whole nother topic. You
Right.
talked about bringing Canadian teams into WER and how there's been a Canadian team in MLR before. What I understand is that there's a big argument going on at the moment about foreign players in MLR, and this is something I've spoken about on podcasts previously. What is behind all this controversy? So I've seen the clip of, I think it was the USA men's head coach saying that we need to stop being a pathway for Pacifica and Canadian players and be a
Yeah.
pathway for American players. Can you just intro us to this argument and then give us your point of view, your opinion as an onlooker?
Sure. So yeah, there was Scott Lawrence on. I think it was the Rugby Rundown with Hooley and Corbs, was saying that we need to invest more in the USA pathways and stop funding Canadian and Pacific Islanders, as you said. So Scott's argument was essentially MLR is actually helping Canadian and the likes of Samoa, Tonga, and Fiji less so because their players are playing elsewhere. But Tonga and Samoa, and actually MLR is contributing a significant number of players to their national sides, which is true. But there's nothing compared to the amount that MLR is contributing to the USA national side. Now, this argument is, I think, valid. Let me get that off. Say that straight away. But I think that quote is horrible. Now, MLR obviously supports USA pathways. USA Rugby, MLR, and World Rugby own a team for that explicit purpose in Anthem Rugby Carolinas. That team's job is to develop USA Eagles. And otherwise, teams in MLR, as of 2025, were allowed 10 foreign players on a match day 23. That's it. Every single week, 10 players could be foreign. Now, Canadians counted as domestic. So you could have as many Canadians as you wanted.
So you could have 10 foreigners and 13 Canadians if you wanted.
You could, which is what the Free Jacks went with pretty much. They had basically their core was made up of Canadians. They had, I think, one USA Eagle.
Toby Fricker.
Toby Fricker, yeah. But he was on loan to Anthem.
Oh,
they had
right.
Caleb Geiger was
Okay.
was on their squad. Toby Fricker was on the Free Jacks, but he was loaned to Anthem because he's a USA Eagle and would get more game time there because Brock Webster was playing, who's a Canadian international for the Free Jacks. So yeah, the Free Jacks have definitely benefited from the Canadian core that they have. Now, the argument is that we should reduce, or MLR should reduce the number of foreign players on a match day 23. Now, I've always been in support of that. I've always said 10 is probably too much for a.
I think that is the most of anywhere in the world. Like if we compare to other places, obviously you've got places like Super Rugby New Zealand where it's like one in 100. Like the players that are foreign. That's not the actual stat, but it's very rare. You got like France, even somewhere like as we think of so independent as France is, that they've got a minimum 16 have to be French. I think. Japan, even we think of this place which brings in foreigners all the time. Actually, there's extremely strict rules about how many foreigners you can have in Japan, and it's less than 10. So it is, MLR is kind of an outlier in how many foreigners it allows.
And that's even got a caveat, because I'm pretty sure unlike anywhere else in the world, you can trade those foreign slots in MLR. So you could say, hey, I want to trade one of your foreign slots to give me 11, and you'd have 9. And I think Anthem, because they are solely focused on developing USA Eagles, they actually traded away, I think, 7 of their international slots. So they had 3, but they never used any foreign players. Or they've used, US college talent that isn't actually USA eligible yet, but will be. And then, let me just get it up quickly now. There would be teams with 11, 12 foreign slots, and that doesn't include Canadians, like I mentioned. So you get even more. Foreigners on a team. Now, the argument is to, like I said, reduce that. I've always said that probably, I think 7 is probably the sweet spot. 7 international players on a match day 23. But from what I've heard, it's kind of circulating lately, is that, just I've got the numbers up here. For 2025, the most foreign players on a matchday 23 was 12 from New England, who won it. So that doesn't seem too good when you look at that. But back to my point. From what I've heard, the argument is to reduce the international players on a matchday 23 from 10 to 5, which is a dramatic reduction. There'd be 5 international players on a matchday 23 and 8 in an entire roster, which is a huge reduction. And that's probably because of the glut of American players that they're going to be circulating around the market because of 4 teams essentially contracting.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a glut in the market of US players, but they've also said that Canadian players will count as foreign now, which I'm not very happy with. I'm not quite sure how whoever decided on this, which is still a rumor right now, I must say. I'm not sure how they can't recognize that a strong Canadian team is good for the USA. And it's really screwing over it. If assuming this would come into effect, it would screw over Canadian players. No one is going to pick, or very, very few people are going to pick a Canadian over the likes of a South African, a New Zealander, an Australian, a Brit, with the exception of maybe like 2 or 3 players, like Lucas Rumble, Mason Flesh, Brock Webster, maybe. No one is going to pick a Canadian if you can go and get an up and coming NPC player, for example, which MLR is pretty healthy recruitment from the NPC. So that is the rumored plan, is to get Canadians, remove their domestic status essentially, and have them count as internationals, which will be heavily reduced. So we could see a massive reduction in Canadians in MLR next year, which would be terrible for the men's team. The Canadian men's team would have to find other places to play, whether that's in Canada or at club level. Who knows? It's pretty disheartening as a Canadian fan to hear that. And to circle back to Scott Lawrence's first comments, they actually come over a little bit crybaby in that, we lost to Canada. If we didn't, if they counted as domestic players, if they didn't count as domestic players, we might have beaten them. Well, you didn't. You should have, but you didn't. So yeah, I mean, it's a lot of debate on that at the minute.
Yeah, I can understand. What was the stat that you told me about the number of players? Like, coming back to like the anthem conversation, the number of players from the MLR final who turned out for the US Eagles.
From the MLR final?
Yeah.
I'm not sure from the final. I can tell you who turned out from the Eagles. Oh, let's find it now. The Free Jacks starting lineup for the final. None of their front row, not their second row, not their back row.
So none of the pack of the MLR winning team were USA Eagles.
Not the starting pack, at least. Balakana, okay. Leroux Milan, Ben Lesage, Canadian. Brock Webster, Canadian. Caleb Geiger was on the bench. At prop, Josh Larson, Canadian. Ethan Fryer, Canadian. Oscar Lennon. Did he play? I don't think he actually was playing for the US in the PNC, though. So none. None in the 23.
Wow.
Oh, no, sorry, take it back. Caleb Geiger, and he's the lone one.
Gosh, that's a stark stat. That's what I'm saying, that no other country in the world has that kind of thing where the domestic league is one. Like, again, I take France, Toulouse versus Bordeaux in the top 14 final. Mm-hmm. You can pick a whole French team from those 2 teams and it would be bloody good. So you talked about Anthem, obviously. So for people who don't know, Anthem is the team that's specifically there to develop USA players. 2 seasons of existence, yet to win a game. So with this rumored investment now from World Rugby of $250 million over 5 years is the number that's been bandied around. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's a lot of that is going to go to try and bolster that situation?
So this is a bizarre thing about Anthem. I did like some season previews ahead of 2025, and I said, I wasn't expecting them to lift the shield or anything like that, but I said basically from the teams that folded at the end of 2024, Anthem picked up some really, really good pieces. The likes of Makeen Ali Khan and Sam Gola, like superbs, studs. I said Anthem are going to be better. They're going to be better. They'll probably win a couple of games, and they didn't. And the weird thing is, I think they were better, but I think every other team was also better, and it's bizarre. They now have the worst. They're now the worst team in MLR history. They've got the longest losing streak in MLR history, something that I never thought would be beaten. And they actually got, I think, 5 points last year and 7 points in the standings the year before. So on paper, they took a step back. So I don't know how many more USA Eagles you can cram into that setup. I mentioned the glut in the market right now. There's already mostly Eagles on that team. Now, something I will say is they actually changed coach towards the end of last season from Alama Iramia, who's a USA assistant coach. He was kind of working both. He stepped back and is going into USA Eagles full time, I think. And Augustine Cavalieri is taking over Anthem full time, who was the head coach of the Dallas Jackals and turned them around and got them into the Western Conference final and, a couple of minutes away from the final. So that's going to help them, I think. I think with the glut of American talent on the market and the reduction of international players, assuming that comes into effect, Anthem will actually have a better chance because the quality of the other teams will probably take a step back or at least plateau
With these reforms,
because with these reforms and with they'll have less foreign talent, which tends to be the more dominating players in the league. They won't be there. That'll just be USA against USA. It'll be Eagles against Eagles pretty much across a 7-team league, or at least guys that are in the running or are going to be future Eagles and stuff like that. It's going to be a massive battle royale of USA Eagles, really. I think Anthem have a chance, but they also have less opportunities because there's only, one argument is, these teams are going to get worse because, there's not going to be so many foreign slots. The other argument is, yeah, but every single player in there is going to be an international caliber player of every other team. So it's going to be tricky for Anthem. The good news for Anthem fans, I suppose, is I think they're the least likely team to fold because they're backed by World Rugby, USA Rugby, and MLR. But I really think I suppose the good news is that USA talent is going to get a lot more game time at the highest level competition in North America. But I don't see how they are going to take a step forward if all other teams are. This is essentially 2026 is going to be a soft reset for the league. Honestly, Everything's going to look so different. It's sort of impossible to say, but it's tough.
Well, yeah, talking about things looking different. Genuine last thing on MLR now, kind of on MLR. Have you seen the rumors of a team or two teams from the USA joining the URC? And if so, what do you think of those rumors?
Yes, I have seen those rumors. A lot of people are saying they're probably rubbish, but I'm pretty sure they've confirmed that the Chicago Hounds have talked to URC at least, and I think it was the Hounds and the Free Jacks have both at least talked to URC. Now the Free Jacks have submitted, they posted saying we will defend our shield in 2026, so I don't think they're going to go anywhere. I don't think the Hounds are going to go anywhere either. I honestly think that this was probably teams eyeing up a way of continuing should MLR have folded. But those rumors have been around for a while for URC wanting to put a franchise in the USA. I just think the logistics of it are bonkers. Now, the URC might have more experience than most because they've got the South African teams in there from the other side of the bloody world. But a USA team in the URC, I think, would have to be like a new franchise. Honestly, I don't think they would be able to take one from MLR while MLR is still going. I think these teams talk to URC just in case, to cover their bases. But there's all kinds of rumors, not even exclusive to the URC. We've had rumors that Super Rugby are gonna look into launching a franchise in the US. There's this mythical R360 that's floating around as some kind of savior of rugby, which I think is a load of rubbish. But the Super Rugby one might have a bit more weight because of the links with RFCLA there, and even RFCLA actually played a preseason game against the Drua last year. So there's some relationships there. I just think it might have been the Sharks circling over the remains of MLR.
Interesting. That's a really interesting point. Thank you so much. So before we move on to the final home straight of the show, I just want to remind people that if you are enjoying, because you've been listening for a little while now, so you're clearly enjoying it. So if you are really enjoying it and you would like to help the show and help the channel, you can get membership on YouTube for just 99 pence a month. All of that money goes back into the channel. It helps me cover the costs of making this YouTube show. If you're watching on a laptop, you should see a join button somewhere, or you can navigate it to it on your mobile device. 99 pence a month. And not only would you be helping me out, but you'll get access to a database of exclusive videos that you won't find anywhere else. I'm extremely grateful to anybody who takes me up on that offer. Last thing then, James, you and I have the thing in common, and it's that we're absolute stats nerds, to the point where you actually have a stats website. So that's where I first came across you. You are on our mutual friend David Lawrence. Shout out, David. Scrum of the Earth podcast, talking stats. Why stats? And obviously, you being in North America, you in sports, I understand over there, have got stats on another level to what we're used to in rugby.
Yeah, they've got stats out of the wazoo. I think it's a massive part of the sporting atmosphere or sporting landscape in North America, where regardless of whatever sport it is. So this actually was sort of a hobby of mine to stay sane during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Because although we had a team, the Toronto Arrows, they weren't even playing here. They were playing down in Atlanta in 2021. They spent the whole season down there. So no games to go to. Work was pretty slow because everyone was stuck inside. So I needed to find something to stop myself going insane and to stop me driving my girlfriend insane. So I said, I think MLR were posting some replays of, some of the best games, is some finals from the past few years while there were no games on. And I think I said I wonder who's the top scorer. I wonder who's got the most appearances. And that resource wasn't out there, which was a bit of a surprise to me from my understanding of North American sports, in which there's numbers for everything everywhere. So I said, well, I have the time. Why don't I figure it out myself? So I went through a load of match reports, a load of, the MLR archives, a load of match replays, and put together essentially a big spreadsheet of everything for every team, every player, every appearance, all the scoring, everything like that. And then I was bored, so I decided to start kind of posting these and saying, hey, this guy's the best scorer for this team, or this guy's the most cap player for this team, or this guy's the biggest, the top try scorer in the league. And that seemed to get some traction, and people seemed to be genuinely interested in that. So I kept doing it and sort of started to come together with some fancy graphics and everything, and then decided in my off time to start working on a website, which is what I'd never done before. I don't know how to do it. I'm still not entirely sure what's going on. And that's now live and has every single match, every single scorer, every single game, every single player cataloged in this database, the North American Rugby database, which is what I'm sort of building on now. It's got the WER in there. It's got MLR. It's got everything you would need to know, I think, at least from those two leagues. And who knows where we'd go in the future, but I'm running out of time.
Yeah, I feel you on that one, man. So the first time I heard you talk about stats, I actually got a little bit emotional because you said something that I'd said previously on social media and got chastised for, and got
Really?
actually kind of attacked by some well-known social media rugby stats people for saying, which what I said was, this stat is rubbish. As in,
Oh,
not that it's not true, as in this as a metric doesn't help me. It's not got value.
yes.
And you said on a podcast, said, I think what you said was there are no good stats for front rowers. And I was like, yes,
Yeah.
yes, somebody else is saying that there is a flaw in how we're doing stats. So talk to me about bad stats, mate. Talk to me about bad stats.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of them that really got on my nerves was meters ran. I'm like, well, that means nothing. Like you could run sideways and that would still count. What does that mean? Like that's useless. We want meters gained, which is past the tackle line. That's one of the first kind of big kind of hills I fought on, and luckily didn't die on that one. Um, but like you said, there's stats only sell you so much in that it's not like sprinting in which there's a number. The one with the lowest number is the best. That's fine. There isn't that because rugby's such a unique game. There's all kinds of different positions. There's all kinds of different tactics and how those positions are used in every single game, let alone every single team, every single league. And front rows really stand out to me because the scrum is their thing. But there's no obviously there's scrums won and scrums lost, but you can't attribute that to one player unless they're forcing a penalty for some reason. But to say penalties earned is a bit strange because it's actually that's the other team actually infringing. It's not them making the other team cheat. So it's because rugby's such a unique game. It's hard to kind of get a real good gauge of what a good kind of performance is from a front row by only the numbers. It's kind of similar for scrum halves. They won't have a massive amount of meters gained, but will have more passes than everyone else. And well, yeah, it's a scrum half. They're obviously going to have more passes than everyone else. What does that tell us? It's unique, and I'm still kind of trying to figure out a way in how I can highlight that a prop had a good game or a scrum half had a great game because it's very difficult to do that through numbers.
Yeah, and some of the numbers that we do get thrown, like the one that gets on my nerves, Opta have started doing win likelihood percentage, but as a graph over time. So it
Mm.
just basically tells you what the score was. And
Yeah,
like
like well, if the team
I
score, they're going to be more likely to win.
yeah, and like I watched the game, like seeing this like 2 days after the game finished, like I know I watched the game. Like what am I learning from seeing this post it? And like it's very clever that you can do it. Well done, but
Hmm.
like what value is it adding? Pack weights is the other one where I'm like, there is no correlation between the weight of the pack and anything else. Like it
No,
and I think I saw something that actually the weight of packs is the differences are very marginal. So it's not like you've got a 1.1 ton pack up against an 800 kilo pack. Everyone's in and around 950 kilos. So
unless like you said, it's absolutely bonkers in that there's a 300 kilo difference. Then it's pretty obvious as well. Like,
yeah,
well, probably the guys with half a car extra are going to win. So it doesn't matter.
yeah. Oh, yeah. And like I said, I said something like that, like this stat isn't very helpful on social media or something. I got someone quite well known saying, you can't say that because their argument was it's mathematically correct. And I was like, okay, fine. But that doesn't mean that it's
Yeah,
helping
you're
tell a
not saying
story.
it's they can be correct and unhelpful. Like it,
Yeah,
like the numbers, they can be yes, this is a number. It doesn't help us in any way. Like that,
yeah.
you're not necessarily saying it's wrong. It's just that it's not helpful.
Have you ever seen like expected points in rugby?
Yes, there's a guy who does it for MLR who does he's got a win likelihood predictor and kind of models that every season. I have seen it, but not very often. I think it's just that guy that I've seen it for.
Yeah, I just because you've got XG in soccer, and I would love to see something like that come
Hmm.
up. I would love to see something like a line out in this position is this likely to lead to a try, something like that. I would love to see, or a scrum in this position, that kind of thing. There's Brendan Shields for Rugbycology does something about platform quality, which is similar to that. in terms of how valuable is this starting point on the pitch, and like how is a team performing compared to the quality of their platforms, which is really interesting. I'd like to see that kind of thing expanded on.
Yeah, I think there's a guy. His name is Alistair Kirsch-Poole, who does. He's an old Glory DC fan. He does playoff odds week to week. He does score likelihood, that kind of thing. That's probably as close as we've got to XG, but XP, I suppose.
Yeah.
He's working on it, I think, but there's a lot goes into that for someone who's doing it as a hobby. So,
oh my God, yes, yeah. We all spend way too much on this. Okay, bringing the numbers back to USA in the last question of the podcast. If you were the stories about this big investment that's coming from World Rugby, the 250 million supposedly that's coming over 5 years. Let's say you get invited to that meeting and you've got one thing that you can say to them, guys, please spend money on this. What would that be?
marketing. Market the league, put it in places. I went to Chicago in 2023 for the Shield final. And this is unique because it was the championship game, but they had the famous subway that goes kind of over the streets in Chicago. They had a massive banner for the MLR final on those trains. Like, well, hundreds of thousands of people are going to see that. But other than the immediate area around where teams play, which is usually not in the markets themselves, it's in the suburbs, there's nothing.
Yeah.
It's about raising awareness of this league exists. You have a local team. These guys are. It's about promoting the league, promoting the teams, and most importantly, I think, is promoting the players, promoting the personalities of the players. And these guys are going to represent the USA at the next World Cup and on the international stage later this year. They're pretty good at doing it for international games, like at the PNC games down in Denver and in Utah. But for MLR, it's sort of non-existent anywhere. So it's the sort of a low-hanging fruit. Really, is the one thing. It would be market the game better. Now, unfortunately, I think a lot of this money is actually to help the USA host the competition, host the 2031 World Cup, and prepare for that. So unfortunately, a lot of it is probably going to go towards stadium renovations and that kind of stuff. So I'm not sure how much we'll actually see at quote unquote grassroots, but MLR isn't necessarily grassroots, but I'm hoping they at least get a bit of a chunk or can at least benefit from the infrastructure that money puts in place. But the easiest thing would be marketing. Make people aware of your product.
Yeah, I think that's a very wise answer. And to be honest, it's what I expected you to say. Anyway, we've come to the end of our chat now, James. Thank you so much for spending time talking to me today, especially with the time difference. I really appreciate you making the effort. Where can people find you and your work?
Sure. So I'm on pretty much all social media. My personal is at Jamdelay, Jamdelay, and I have a dedicated sort of account for my website, which is narugbydb.com or narugbydb on Twitter, and MLR Stats on Instagram, which is my big page for everything MLR related. And I think that's pretty much it. Oh, and the website, narugbydb.com. That's the website for all things MLR, all things WER, most things rugby in North America.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, James. Thank you to everybody for listening to this. I hope you found it interesting. If you found it thought-provoking, please leave those thoughts in the comments down below. Enjoy your rugby, and I hope that everybody's team wins. Cheers.